Hey ladies, welcome back to my channel. As you can tell by the caption of the video today, we're going to be doing an acrylic full set for beginners, but this one is going to be XL Stiletto edition. So of course, I always begin by pushing my client's cuticles back, and now we are going around the client's entire cuticle with our cone-shaped drill bit. And this is super important because it just exposes the entire nail and gets all of that nitty-gritty out, which does help prevent lifting. So now we're taking our 180 grit sanding band and we are going around the client's cuticle area as well as the entire nail, making sure to keeping that file moving. You know, that will cause friction, which causes heat if you leave it in one spot. But this is really important because this step gets rid of all of the natural oils, which helps prevent lifting, popping off, breaks, etc. Those oils are something that we all produce, and it kind of acts like a barrier between the acrylic and the natural nail. So you want to make sure that you are really doing that step. Now going ahead and applying the tips. As you can see, these are pre-shaped coffin, which I like to use when I'm doing my stiletto because you end up cutting them more narrow anyway, so it's better off just using the thinner tips rather than the square. And as you can see, I made sure to place all of the nail tips following the client's fingernail rather than the finger. I say that because a lot of times clients can come in and their fingers will be crooked or just naturally go in different directions. So you want to make sure that you're following the client's fingernail and making sure that you apply all of the nail tips going in the same direction evenly. I like to start with the pinky and make my way to the thumb and making sure that I align it with the previous nail. That way in the end they are all nice, straight, and even. And so as you've seen, I went ahead and cut the client's nails to the length that she wanted and then clipped just a little bit of the sides off. And then I do go in and just file to make it a more narrow shape. Now you don't want to cut too much off, as you can see in the video prior to this clip, or I guess I should say the clip prior to this clip. I did just cut a little bit amount off, and I do that because the more you cut, the thinner your nails will be. And you don't want your stiletto tips to be too thin because you do a lot of filing, not only in the pre-acrylic but also afterwards. So you just want to keep that in mind. And as you can see here, I am making sure to bounce back and forth from side to side. That is a big mistake that I made when I first started doing nails, and it caused me to have to take off and replace so many nail tips. So my biggest tip when doing a stiletto nail is to make sure that you are going from side to side, looking at the nail tip, making sure that you're getting the shape that you want. Again, you want to make sure that you're keeping the file straight up against the nail tip and pointing it inward, like so. A lot of people get nervous with stiletto, but it's actually pretty easy to do. It just takes a little bit more time, and it can be a little tedious because you have to make sure that the nails are all even and the points are all even. So doing that does take some time, but if you just make sure to go back and forth from side to side, perfecting that point, it will be way easier than how a lot of people make it seem. This is actually one of my favorite shapes to do. It does take a little bit longer, well, not a little bit, it does take longer to file these and shape these than it does any other shape, but that's pretty obvious as to why. You know, you have to get it super crisp. And I do always like to say, make sure you are getting the undersides of the nails. I say this in every tutorial, but I'm definitely going to emphasize it on this video because when you're doing the stiletto shape, as you file it, because you are making the tip so narrow, the back part of the nail, or I guess I should say the part that is closest to the natural nail, it does kind of start to bend underwards, if that makes sense. I guess it's really something that you would just have to see in person. It's kind of hard to explain, but what I mean by that is there's a lot of buildup that gets under there. And as you can see, once I get done shaping, I do kind of like take my file and go under the sides like I'm doing right here, and it just gets off that extra nail tip and make sure that it's nice and straight underneath, because you want to do this on every single set, but especially stiletto, because like I mentioned, the nail tips are so narrow and they're so thin. So you want to make sure that you're getting every angle, making sure that it's super crisp, super clean, but especially with stiletto, because it's so obvious when you have, a lot of ridges or the underside of your nail is lumpy or has a lot of acrylic. It has jagged edges. It's so much more noticeable with stiletto than it is any other shape. So you just definitely want to make sure that you are keeping that in mind. Here I'm using an 80 grit file, which is believe the sharpest. I use this with every set, but I feel like it definitely helps with stiletto, and you want to make sure that you're using a new file with every single client, of course, because it's a porous item, but that comes in handy when you're doing the stiletto shape because, girl, let me tell you, it gets them nails crisp. As you can see, they look nice and good, and you don't want to go too ham with filing because you have to remember once you put the acrylic on, you will file again. So just get them to a nice shape, but don't file too much. So now we're blending in the nail tip with the natural nail, and this is super, super important because this helps prevent lifting and will really, really help your retention rate. Filing the entire nail tip is totally optional. You do not have to do that. But I like to file most of it, especially right underneath where the natural nail and the nail tip meet. But you definitely want to make sure that you do this step. It's really important and it will help your retention overall, which is what you want to give your clients. Here I'm applying my Mia Secret Dehydrator. You can find this on Amazon. I totally recommend. What this does is just apply another layer of getting rid of those natural oils and really dehydrates the nail. And next I'm applying my Young Nails Protein Bond. This is a bonder for the acrylic. It helps the acrylic really bond to the natural nail. I don't show it, but I do apply 2 layers on each hand. That's totally optional, but I've just found to see that every set that I've done, I do it on all my sets, but ever since I started doing that, I had good retention anyways. But now, y'all, it's crazy. No lifting, no breaks, retention, nails lasting 2-3 months. Like, even though that's not recommended, but still, it's just the point. Definitely recommend it, but it is optional. So here I am using Sand by Sugar and Cream. There are a Instagram boutique, not a boutique, but an Instagram nail supply store, and I really, really love them, you guys. This is not a paid promotion. I'm not even going to go too deep into that, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I give them their flowers every single video. That's all I ever use is Sugar and Cream, so definitely check them out. But as you can see, I went ahead and applied my first bead right where the natural nail and the nail tip meet. And when doing stiletto, you do want to make sure that you're working with a little bit of a drier bead. Not too much though, not too much. Because of course, too dry of a bead, you know, will just cause the acrylic to get all mushed up in your brush. And that just is a whole nother issue in itself. So the reason I say working with a drier bead, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I feel like it helps prevent too much acrylic flowing to the bottom and then eventually getting wiped off when you go ahead and, you know, wipe up against the nails. Now, this is just my opinion. Some people may say work with a wetter bead, but I feel like with stiletto, it is super important to make sure that the tips of your nails aren't too thin. They're already very narrow, resulting in not that much acrylic being able to be right there. So you just want to keep that in mind when applying the acrylic. I've come to find that when I use a little bit of a drier bead, I feel like it helps more of my acrylic set and stay on the tip rather than, you know, not float, but fall to the bottom. And then, of course, I always tell you guys to follow your shape, you know, wipe the sides of your nail tips with your brush. So I feel like that also helps, well, not helps, but I feel like that also can sometimes pull too much acrylic off, especially when doing stiletto. So just keep that in mind. But yes, especially with stiletto, make sure that you are wiping the sides of your nail tip, and this is super, super helpful because it will prevent shaping in the end. Of course, you still have to go back over and clean the shaping up, but you won't have to do too much filing. You know, you just spent all that time in the prep phase getting this nice crisp shape, so help yourself keep that shape by making sure to work neat. Wiping the sides of the nail tips is very important. And so again, I placed the first bead where the natural nail and the nail tip meet. That is the apex. That is the most important part of the nail. I like to always tell people when I'm doing my tutorials that they can think of that as kind of like the root of a flower. As long as that is taken care of and that's nice, the rest of the flower will bloom and grow. So what I mean by that is, as long as your apex is nice and built up, the rest of your nail, as long as you are feathering your acrylic, you don't want to drag it, you don't want to pull it, because then that's just pulling most of your product off and it's going to clog your brush. As long as you're feathering it downwards lightly, you will build up the rest of your foundation and your apex will be good. Now, you do want to remember that just because you make your nail super fat and super loaded with acrylic does not mean that the nail will not break. The apex is the root, the heart of the nail. So you want to make sure that that is built up and that has a good foundation. And if it does, and if you're applying your acrylic correctly, everything else will fall into place. I think my biggest tip with acrylic application would be to make sure that you are working with, of course, not beads that are too wet, not beads that are too dry. And I always say work with medium-sized beads. I said this because when you work with, really small beads, it's just going to take longer because you're having to build and build and build. But when you're working with too large of acrylic, especially if you're a beginner, I feel like that sometimes causes you to struggle because you're trying to get this one big large bead not only to set without running off the sides of the nails or setting too soon, whatever, but it's kind of hard to manipulate one big large bead at a time. Now, that is just my opinion, which is why I said I work with medium-sized beads, but definitely do what you see fit and do it based off of the set. When I'm doing short nails, I do sometimes use one big bead, but obviously I'm not having to manipulate it too much because it's just one short square nail. Another thing that I like to remind people when doing stiletto, with every set, I always try to use about 3 to 4 beads as my base. And of course, if you ever have to add any more or feel like you need to add any more, definitely do it. You'll see in this video that after I apply acrylic to all the nails, I go back and I still add another bead or two, just to make sure that those nails are nice and solid, nice and built up. And I do that because I would rather be safe than sorry. It's so much easier to add acrylic than it is to spend the time taking it off, filing it in the end. Again, it really helps with saving you time, because as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that this hard work that you spent on perfecting this shape, you don't make it for nothing. You want to make sure that you're trying as much as you can to keep that shape. That way, when you do get to the filing process, all you really have to do is clean that shape up, use your e-file to smooth it out, and you're good to get going. So just keep that in mind. As you can see, I'm constantly making sure to wipe around my client's cuticle, covering the entire skin. And this is really important because no matter how good of a nail tech you are, no matter how experienced you are, sometimes some acrylic can still seep over and get on the client's skin, which will 100% cause lifting, and it's just uncomfortable overall. So you want to make sure that even if you are 100% certain that there's no acrylic over there, still just take your brush with a little bit of monomer, not too much at all, just as long as your brush is wet, and making sure that you are wiping around your client's skin and the cuticle area. This is super, super important, and it just adds so much quality and so much to the set. So you do want to make sure that you're doing that. A way to kind of prevent that, or to help make that easier, is when you are applying the cuticle bead, you do not want to apply the cuticle bead right on top of the cuticle. So when I get to that point with this nail, I will help better explain that. So we will jump back to that in just a second, but you want to make sure that you are also cleaning your brush in between each bead. As you can see, I'm making sure to dip it in my monomer and I'm wiping it on the napkin after a few strokes, after placing the bead, as much as I can, honestly, because as I said, it is so easy to clog your brush, and that is one of the most terrible things to do. Not on your end. I don't say terrible because that means you're a terrible nail tech. I mean terrible as in, if you have a client afterwards and now you have acrylic in your brush, now you're having to spend time soaking in acetone and doing all this cleaning. It's just a mess. So just make sure that you are making sure to clean your brush. So back to the cuticle bead. As you can see, I did not place it on the cuticle. I placed it right below. And so what I'm going to do here is first manipulate the sides. I'm going to make sure I'm cleaning up the sides so they do not fall nor dry on my client's skin, and I'm going ahead and feathering them down. Once I have that done, I'm still making sure to work on feathering that acrylic down. But as you can see, the acrylic did start to inch up and get closer to the cuticle. I do believe that I apply one more bead. That one was totally jacked up. But yes, as you can see, I do apply one more bead, again not at the cuticle, and I just kind of use the tip of my brush to push it up. Now you don't want to push it up directly on the cuticle, but as you push it, you just want to push it up a little bit, because as you push it up and begin to feather it down, it will still slide up a little bit more and it will fall right into place. So that is one of my biggest tips also that I can give when it comes to applying the acrylic. Absolutely do not apply the cuticle bead at the cuticle. It is so much work getting that acrylic off in the end when it comes to filing, rather than just keeping it neat and clean, because the whole goal here is to just keep the acrylic nice and flush. You want to give off the look that it grew right out of your client's hand. You know, that's the whole goal here. So definitely apply the bead a little bit under the cuticle, and again, like I said, you just want to kind of feather it down and it will begin to push up. As you can see, I did the same thing here. I just feathered it down. It pushed right up to where I needed it to be. I wiped my client's skin, wiped the cuticle area, and wiped the sides of the nails, and we're good. Yes, that is really important. I forgot to mention one more thing when it comes to those cuticle beads, is that helps prevent lifting. So if your acrylic is on your client's skin or on your client's cuticle, when that nail starts to grow out, you have to think the cuticle is a little bit more risen than the nail. So when that nail starts to grow out, that acrylic that was on the client's skin is going to be a little risen, and that will cause lifting. You definitely want to avoid that. Like I said, the main goal in every set is to give your client a lasting set. You want the retention to be super high. You want the nails to not be lifting, that way they can get that feeling. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, you guys, that I just yawned, because I'm just so tired. I literally am doing this voiceover at 1:02 in the morning. That's how much I love y'all. I told y'all that I was going to hop back on my grind and be posting these tutorials for y'all, and I really meant that. I'm sticking to it. Video posted yesterday. This video is going to be posted again, and I got more videos that are being edited as we speak. So definitely stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you can know when I post. That was a little off topic, but I had to let y'all know why I'm over here yawning. Your girl is tired. I've been working. But anyways, yeah, so as you can see, I went back and I added some more beads. Like I said, it's always better to add than have to take away. And you want to make sure that your client, you know, is walking out with some sturdy, good nails. You don't want them to be texting you, you know, a day after their appointment, like, hey girl, I need a repair, or anything like that. So just keep that in mind for sure, and make sure that, again, you are keeping the client's skin nice and clean, keeping that shape. That way when we get to the next step, as you will see, the shape will be super nice and super clean, and I will just be cleaning up that shape. I used to apply the acrylic, I wouldn't say I used to just slap it on, you guys, but I was not extra careful with it, and I used to spend so much time filing. It was actually a little embarrassing. But we live and we learn. Another thing I want to recommend before we move on to the next part is please with any set, look at your client's nails from different angles, especially from the side, and make sure that you have that nice apex and that you have the nice descending slope, that your nails, the foundation is nice starting at the apex all the way down to the free edge, because if not, you need to add more acrylic where needed. Sometimes when applying the acrylic, you're only looking at it from the higher point of view, or whatever point of view you want to call that. You're looking at it from that point of view, so sometimes it gets a little easy to not really pay attention to that. So you just want to make sure that you're looking at it from different angles so you can see if you need to add anything here nor there, and do so. So you guys pretty much get the picture as far as how acrylic application goes, but I do want to speed up the video a little bit on the thumb because it's the same exact process. However, I do have a few more tips. So it's the same process, but I do always like to say with the thumb, especially with stiletto, you do have to take your time a little bit more, only because the thumb is of course wider. So that's wider of a nail tip, and the acrylic is going to spread out more, meaning it's going to be a little bit thinner. So you just want to pay attention to that and making sure that you are building up the nail, making sure that you're adding enough acrylic, because the acrylic will be thin. You do not want your client to be texting you saying that their nails are bending like nail tips. You don't want them to be breaking, anything of that sort. So a lot of people just, think, oh, I'm going to use the same steps that I did with my other nails and it'll be fine. Now that is true, but only to a certain extent, because like I said, the thumbnail is wider, so the acrylic spreads out more, meaning that it is thinner. It becomes thinner as it spreads. So you want to just take your time, like I said, and really build up that thumbnail, making sure that it's nice, looking at it from the side, looking at it from underneath, making sure that you have enough acrylic. And if not, girl, like I always say, add some more if needed, because you'd rather just be safe than sorry. You'd rather have it nice and sturdy than get to the filing part and now your nail just snapped and you have to soak that off, reapply the tip, like do it all over again. That will be such a headache. That has happened to me like 2 times in my whole nail career. Worst thing ever. I learned from that so quick. But yeah, it's pretty much the same exact steps. Just keep that in mind. A lot of people don't really think about that. But that is something that you will learn as you go. You just learned it here today, but you'll definitely learn it as you go. And you'll definitely learn it if you ever have to soak off a nail and completely redo it like I did twice. Probably the worst thing ever. But yeah, here again, I'm making sure to wipe them cuticles, keeping everything nice and clean, pushing up as much as I can. That's another tip, you guys, really quickly. The tip of your brush is for manipulating the acrylic, and the body of your brush is for patting it down, spreading it out, feathering it. Please remember that. I feel like that is what causes a lot of people's brush to get clogged sometimes, and they don't realize it. So if you feel like you're having that problem, definitely just pay attention to how you're applying your acrylic and how you're using your brush, and definitely invest in a good brush. I got my brush from Sugar and Cream. I've been using it for 2.5 years and it was $50, which is a little pricey for a brush, but like literally, y'all, not at all. When you get the quality that I'm getting, when you've been using it for as long as I have, that's pocket change. Literally $50 for a brush that I've been using for 2 years and it's still going perfectly strong. Yeah, get you one. So now we're back to the filing. As I said, I made sure to keep my shape nice and clean and neat, so I do not have to do much filing here. I'm just cleaning up that shape and giving the nice crispy point. As you can see, there is a lot of acrylic that's snuck under to the sides of the nail. So again, I'm making sure to pull my client's skin back and file that underside of the nail, getting rid of all that acrylic, all of that excess that got underneath of there during the prep and the application. With the stilettos, I do kind of like to start my file more up towards the cuticle and file downward, again keeping it at an angle. I feel like with square coffin you don't really have to do this as much, but I just like to, because I like to make sure that the shape from the cuticle area down to the tip is as even and solid as possible, because with stiletto I just feel like it's way more noticeable. So I do like to just do that. It's totally optional though. You can just file the tip and use, save your e-file for doing the steps closer to the cuticle. But that's just my opinion. I feel like it just helps really get that shape super crisp and clean, as you can see. And again, you don't want to file too much here. You already did a lot of filing in the beginning when you put the tips on. You want to make sure that you're still using that same method of going back and forth, a few files at a time, because you do not want to take too much off, especially not in this stage. And as you can see, I am making sure to go back and check the nails. Sometimes after looking at them for a while, especially with stiletto, they can kind of just look like they're good. So I kind of like to move on sometimes and then go back and double check just in case I need to file anymore or straighten them up anymore. So now I'm taking my e-file and I'm going around the client's cuticle as well as the entire nail, Going around the cuticle is super important because it seals the acrylic, and this is important because it helps prevent lifting and helps that retention again. So sealing the cuticle is super simple. You just start from one side of the client's cuticle and make your way around. You want to keep the file moving at all times, and not at too high of a speed. The reason I say you want to keep it moving at all times is because it will cause friction if you leave it in one spot, and friction causes burning. So definitely keep that file moving. And once you seal that cuticle and you get it nice and flush with the nail, you want to make sure that you are filing the rest of the nail. Now the goal here is not to take off any acrylic. It's really to just flatten and smooth it out. So you just want to keep that in mind. And that's another reason why during the application process, I said to make sure that you are trying to make your foundation as neat as possible. You don't want to apply too much acrylic, because then in this stage, you'll just be having to file most of it off, because you don't want a big chunky nail unless, you know, that's what your client asked for. But yes, the goal here is not to take much off of the nail. You're kind of, again, like I said, just sealing that cuticle, getting it nice and flat, nice and flush with the natural nail, and getting the rest of the nail smoothed out and ready to be buffed for the design. Another thing that I want to say is make sure that you are being careful when you are around your client's cuticle, because one wrong move and you will completely slice their cuticle. So the drill bit that I'm using here is a ceramic drill bit off of Amazon. You can definitely use your sanding band if you'd like. I used to for quite a while because I was scared to cut people. I do feel like the ceramic drill bits give a much more neater look, and it gets the job done way quicker. But if you're someone that, you know, wants to work on your e-filing methods or your, you know, technique, whatever the case may be, but you're scared of cutting clients, you can definitely get ceramic safety drill bits off of Amazon. They're pretty cheap. They get the job done really well, so I definitely recommend them. But now we're buffing the nail. This is a super easy step. You just want to make sure you're getting the client's entire nail as well as the undersides. This is just smoothing it out, getting it ready for that design. And then I don't show this, but I do apply cuticle oil around my client's entire cuticle as well on the underside, and I have them wash them with soap, and it gives them a really nice clean base. Now I do not show the design, but this client decided to get the trending nails on TikTok called the mortem nails, I think they're called. Don't quote me on that, but I know that it's something of that sort. So yeah, she wanted to get a blood splatter in the little design. So these are super cute. I'm actually feeling them. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.